Welcome to Parent University. This is a recording of a live Parent University session that took place on June 11th, 2024.
All right, so without any further ado, I'll pass it over to our guest, Greg. Greg, please introduce yourself.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. First, thank you so much to our hosts, Demelza, Jerry, and our interpreter, Patricia, for their support tonight. Thank you very much. My name is Greg Doman, and as Demelza said, I am the director of sixth grade academies. This is my first year in this role. Prior to that, I was the principal at Jefferson Academy Middle School for 6 years. In total, I've been working in DC middle schools for 14 years. Sixth grade is particularly my jam. I've been a sixth grade teacher, a sixth grade administrator, and obviously principal of a sixth grade. We launched sixth grade academies in DCPS at the beginning of this school year at 11 middle schools: Brookland, Elliott Hine, Hart, Ida B. Wells, Jefferson, Johnson, Kelly Miller, Kramer, McFarland, Sousa, and Stewart Hobson. And sixth grade academy is basically a strategy to provide more support resources to our sixth graders and their families as they enter middle school. That is one of the most critical transitions of a young person's life as it relates to education. And sixth grade academies strive to make sure that that is the most supportive, seamless transition possible through innovative and proactive family engagement strategies, additional academic, social emotional supports for students, signature field trip experiences throughout the course of the year that help to build students' sense of belonging in their new community and build connections to those peers and adults at their school. So we saw a lot of success with our first year of sixth grade academies. At the time, or for now, they are only at those 11 schools I mentioned, but we are hoping to expand beyond that in the years to come. But regardless of where your student is going, for sixth grade in DC public schools, I'm confident they're going to have a really amazing experience. And I will slow down for translation. Thanks, Demelza. All right. So I am here this evening to talk about the transition into middle school. I would argue that it is the most difficult transition in a young person's school career, right? You might think about kindergarten to first grade is a difficult transition. Certainly middle school to high school, 8th to 9th grade. Of course, high school to college, huge transition. But I would argue that the transition into middle school is the most difficult and the most critical because when a student is going from 5th to 6th grade, they are at the most vulnerable point in their lives, perhaps, in terms of physical, social, emotional changes, self-esteem, how important the opinion of peers are, and going to a new school with all new classmates at that age can be really damaging if it's not done supportively and thoughtfully. And there's actually national research that demonstrates that if a student is not successful in their 6th grade year, it can actually have major implications for high school graduation 6 years later. In fact, according to a 2009 study, and this was done in Philadelphia schools, if a 6th grade student fails either math or English, if they have attendance under 80%, or if they have poor behavior marks, if any of those three things are true, their chances of graduating high school on time are between 10 and 20%. So extremely, extremely low. So 6th grade is a critical year, not only for success in middle school, but success in high school and beyond. And we're here tonight to talk about some very easy, straightforward things that you can do to prepare not only your student, but yourself and your family for middle school, because they're going to be starting it in about 2.5 months. So that's coming up very quickly. So let's start with some major differences between elementary school and middle school. So right off the bat, your student's day is going to look very different in terms of schedule, the spaces they're in, how many adults they're interacting with. So typically, right, I'm not an elementary school expert, but typically at an elementary school, your student would see 1 or 2 teachers for their core classes. So math, English, science, and social studies. They probably have those classes every day. And like I said, 1 or 2 teachers, so you're communicating with the same couple people. And then they probably have specials or electives like PE, art, music. For the most part in elementary school, students go to those once a week. So it's not an everyday class on the same level as their others. So really, you probably have like 2, maybe 3 primary teachers that you are interacting with in elementary school, and probably not much more than that. And I would venture to say that you probably have like 1 person who you're mainly going to with questions. When your student gets to middle school, they're going to have probably likely 6 to 8 different teachers. So they're going to be in 6 to 8 different classes. Of course, their core content classes, but what's different in middle school is our electives. Sometimes we call them inner core enrichment. In middle school, those students have those classes as often as their core classes. So at some middle schools, students have all their classes every day. So they might have 7 classes each day for 45 minutes with 7 different teachers. Okay, some schools do their schedule that way, so it looks the exact same every day. Other schools are on a block schedule or an A-B day schedule, where students have 4 classes on A day, and then on B day, they have 4 different classes. Obviously, the periods are longer, but in that case, they wouldn't have math every single day. They wouldn't have science every single day. It's every other day. So that's one of the biggest things, is that your student's going to be navigating more classes, more spaces within the building, more teachers. And in a lot of these cases, students may not be cohorted in all of those classes. What that means is your student may not go with the same group to all their classes, right? They may have their core classes with the same 20 kids, but then they may go to art with a different group of kids. They may go to PE with a different group of kids. So that's sort of like structurally one of the major differences. But in terms of the rest of the experience, we know that as our students enter middle school, they're at the age where they do need to be more independent, where they need to take more responsibility and ownership over their education, their grades. So we know that that's a big emphasis in middle school, and we want to set our students up to be successful with that. The number one thing I would say here is that it doesn't happen magically. Like anything else, it needs to be taught. Right? Students owning their education, checking their grades, staying on top of their homework, staying organized. All of that needs to be taught like any other skill. So we'll talk more about that in a bit, but that's one of the biggest things. Our students need to take on more independence. We know that a lot is happening physically, psychologically, emotionally during this age, 11, 12, 13. So we know that we're going to see a lot of different changes as they enter middle school. In terms of expectations of your students' middle school, it's going to be different school to school. So don't assume that if one thing's one way at one middle school, it's going to be the same at another. Schools are pretty different in terms of programmatically in terms of academics, things they offer in terms of extracurriculars, opportunities outside the classroom, but also their expectations of students and families. From uniforms to cell phone policies to behavior policy, how they engage with families. Are they doing home visits? Do we do student-led conferences? How often do we have family events? All of these things are different school to school. So it's important that you're locked in and getting all of that information so you know what the expectations are for your student and yourself. Middle school does offer some opportunities for students to take accelerated courses, particularly in math. The goal is to get all of our students to take Algebra 1 by 8th grade, which would mean that they have that high school credit already heading into high school, and they can start 9th grade with geometry or a more advanced math class. So that is our goal, is to get all of our students to Algebra by 8th grade. So that means when your student starts middle school in 6th, depending on where their level is, they may be placed into an accelerated math class right away as a 6th grader. So we have them on track toward Algebra in 8th. Or they may have an additional math class, a math intervention class, to help them get back to grade level if they're below grade level. and still give them a chance to get on that accelerated track and get to algebra by 8th. So math is an area where there are a lot of opportunities for acceleration and more advanced coursework. If you are locked in, paying attention, asking the right questions, those exist. Students can also earn high school credit for foreign language. Students are required to take a foreign language in 7th and 8th grade, so it may not be offered in 6th grade. But know as they advance to 7th and 8th, if they do well in their foreign language courses, they can actually earn some high school credit there as well. And then beyond math and foreign language, each school is different. Some schools offer some accelerated courses in literacy or arts, STEM. It's all different school to school. That might be one of their core courses, or it might be an elective, a special that's targeted toward more advanced students. So again, stay locked into what your school is communicating, what they're offering, but those opportunities do exist. And then we're looking ahead. We're not only looking ahead to the rest of middle school and high school and college, we're looking at all the options that exist for our students in their post-secondary lives. So we, in middle school, definitely look for opportunities for like real-world career experiences. For example, we have a great course called Project Lead the Way, where students get to really experience a bunch of different STEM professions and fields to see if they can find something that sparks their interest. But beyond that, we have several schools who are parts of CTE programs, career and technical education, where students get additional opportunities to be exposed to fields and careers that they otherwise wouldn't have been. So middle school, we start to ramp that up. And then it only goes up from there as students advance to high school as well. All right, so let's get into the practical tips. It is June 11th. Your student is starting 6th grade in 2.5 months. What are the things you need to do to make sure they're ready? First off, if you haven't already enrolled your student in their middle school for next year, do that ASAP, immediately. If not tonight, do it tomorrow, get it done, because if your student isn't enrolled, then you are likely missing out on information that schools have already sent or they are starting to send over the next few weeks. So you don't want to be missing out on that information, because it's going to talk about summer opportunities, family orientation, summer bridge, as well as other information that you want. In a lot of cases, you will not get it unless you are enrolled for school. So please do that immediately so you don't miss out on that information. In addition to enrolling for the school year, all of our 6th grades offer a summer bridge experience over the summer. It's a week long. For the most part, schools are doing it during the week of August 5th to 9th, but there are some schools that are doing a different week. So again, you need to be paying attention to what your school is sending out so you know when summer bridge is. But summer bridge is highly, 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 highly recommended for your new 6th grader. It will give them an opportunity to meet their new peers, many of their new teachers, and the adults who are going to work with them, learn about the school, take a tour of the school, but also get a lot of content that's going to be relevant and prepare them for a successful start in the fall. So please prioritize signing your student up for summer bridge and making sure they attend. It's only 1 week. Some schools do full days. Some schools do half days. Uniforms generally are not required. Schools do usually serve breakfast and lunch, but again, your school will send the relevant information for their campus. And then finally, in addition to Summer Bridge, DCPS offers a wealth of summer programs that you can still sign up for. And one that I want to particularly promote is the Algebra Accelerator. I talked on the last slide about getting our students onto an advanced track for math with the goal of getting them in 8th grade algebra. One of the best ways you can do that is by signing them up for the Algebra Accelerator. This is a month-long course from June 26th to July 31st. It's offered at 3 different campuses, McFarland, Sousa, and Stewart Hobson. So there are places around the city. It's 3 hours each weekday. And what it's going to do is make sure that your student is going into middle school on or above grade level and advancing toward that goal of algebra by 8th grade at a minimum. So they can sign up for that, do that. And the best part is we'll have another Algebra Accelerated next summer, so your student can continue to get that additional coursework. But if your student can't attend this summer, you know that you will likely have another opportunity next summer. So highly recommend the Algebra Accelerator. Advanced math, getting on an advanced track in math opens up so many doors once your student gets to high school and beyond that. So one of the best things that you can do for your student right now is to get them that additional math support that you can do through the Accelerator program.
Thank you, Greg. Real quick, Greg, is the Accelerator Enrichment Program, is that cost-free to families?
100% free, as are all the other DCPS summer programs that you could find on the same site as the Algebra Accelerator.
Excellent, thank you. And families, in the chat, let me put that on the screen here so you can see it. Jerry, who's part of the engagement team, he is dropping the links to these things. So if you are on your device, you can open the chat feature and access the links. Enrollment, we have online enrollment. So you can do that from your home. This is the link to the Summer Bridge and the Algebra Accelerator registration. And for families who speak Spanish, we have the links there, and there's also translation to Spanish available there. All right.
All right, thanks, Demelza. So you're enrolled for next year, you're enrolled for Summer Bridge, you're enrolled for Algebra Accelerator, right? 3 for 3. Now what? What else can you do? I think the absolute most important thing after enrolling is opening up the lines of communication with your student's new school, right? You may feel like, oh, the summer's about to hit, teachers are going off for vacation, you know, this isn't the right time to reach out to the school. I'm going to wait till August, September to reach out. That would be a mistake. There are your 6th grade administrator. There's a 6th grade assistant principal pretty much at every middle school. That person's working all summer. There are other 12-month staff who are working all summer. Many of our teachers pick up opportunities and are working throughout the summer. And not enough families reach out over the summer to introduce themselves, introduce their student, set up a meeting over the summer to start talking about your student, their specific needs, what they bring to the table, right? You want to make sure that your student's new school knows everything they could possibly need to know about your student and your family so that you are served and your student has a really positive experience. So why not reach out now? If you're enrolled, you're getting that information, reach out to the 6th grade assistant principal and say, hey, can we set up a 30-minute meeting for July, right? We can do it in person, we can do it over Teams or Zoom. But building that relationship on the front end is going to be so valuable. And like I said, not enough families take advantage of it. When I was a 6th grade assistant principal, maybe 3 or 4 families would reach out over the summer in advance of the 6th grade year. But I tell you what, those 3 or 4 families, I had probably the closest, tightest relationship with throughout the year because we built that foundation on the front end. So don't be shy about reaching out now and setting up a conversation. There are going to be orientations. I already mentioned Summer Bridge, but other events over the summer as well. Absolutely make sure that you attend any family orientations. But in addition to that, any school events that are going on, it can only help to attend them. It allows your student to meet more of their new classmates, get more comfortable in their school community, but it allows you as the parent to do the same and to start building some strong connections with your new school. So open up the lines of communication. Send an email to find out who the 6th grade assistant principal is, send an email to them, see if you can set up an initial conversation, and then just keep the lines of communication open. You know, educators in DCPS really pride themselves on being accessible and responsive. So reach out, and even if it is over the summer, a lot of our staff is accessible and happy to engage with you.
Thank you, Greg. And families, if you're not quite sure who or how to start reaching out to your school administrators, the Enroll DC, the enrollment website can lead you to the websites for the middle schools, or you can also just, do a Google search and call the number, email the numbers that are there. That is all available online, specifically on this link. You can find that. Also, a lot of our schools have social media. And you can connect if you look up, like Kelly Miller like in Instagram, you will see like the little mascot, and they're constantly posting videos of the activities they have. You can see like teachers and like the assistant principals and principal like leave messages there. So start getting to know that community, the new community you'll join in middle school that way.
Thanks, Melza. I'm also just going to drop my email address in the chat. If you don't know who your student's 6th grade 8 assistant principal is, you don't know who the right person is to reach out to, feel free to send me a note, and I'm sure I can get you the person pretty immediately. So in addition to what Demelza said, which were all good tips, if you want to shoot me an email, I'm happy to help connect you with the person who would be most helpful. All right. So we've talked about enrolling in your student's school and the summer opportunities that exist. We talked about opening the lines of communication with your new school and your student's 6th grade administrator. So what else? What can you be doing at home with your student? So I identified 3 things that I think are the most valuable that you can be doing with your student. First off, multiplication facts. We all remember when we were in school and we learned our times tables and how that happened, and we all probably have either fond or not so fond memories of that. It's still a very, very important thing, and it's something that our students come to middle school sorely lacking in a lot of cases. And this is particularly true post-pandemic because a lot of our students lost out on some of those years where you were really drilling multiplication facts all the time. So it's very routine now for 6th graders to come into to middle school not knowing their times tables. If I say 6 times 7, they're looking at me with a blank face. That makes middle school math 10 times more challenging for them. So if you're going to do nothing else with your student this summer, times tables, multiplication facts 1 through 12. Right? Go on Amazon right now and buy a $3 pack of flashcards, print out some multiplication tables where they can fill in all the times tables. But if you do nothing else, make sure that your student is a wizard in their times tables by the time August comes around. They will thank you, your student's math teacher will thank you, and it's going to put them on a better path toward getting to advanced options in math. In additional multiplication facts, it cannot hurt to have your student be practicing multi-digit addition, subtraction, multiplication. And if you want to get into a little long division, that can't hurt. But long division actually is a standard in 6th grade that is taught explicitly. So if you don't get to that, it's okay. But times tables and then multi-digit addition, subtraction, and multiplication. You'd also be surprised how many students forget how to carry a number, how to regroup when they're subtracting. So that is really helpful as well. Reading. The more your student is reading a book that they enjoy and is on their reading level, the stronger they are going to be entering middle school. So you want your reader to be reading at or above grade level, because that's going to allow them to access content in all sorts of subjects. If your student is on grade level or above grade level in reading, they're going to do better in math. They're going to be doing better in science. They're going to be doing better in social studies, because every subject is text heavy, even math at this point. So making sure your student is reading every single day, right? Whether it's 30 minutes or more, designating a time, a space where that happens. How are they recording what they've done, and maybe, answering some questions about the book they're reading, or at night around the dinner table, you're asking questions about the book that they're reading. But make sure your student is reading every single day, something they enjoy and something that is relatively on their level. And then along with that, our incredible DCPS library program has all sorts of resources online that you can access, so that students can be reading. If you don't have physical books, if you don't have time to go to the library to pick out books, there are a number of ebook programs available online through the DCPS library program that students can be doing that reading on a device as well. So definitely take advantage of those resources. But in terms of what your students should be working on, times tables, basic math, calculations, and reading.
Thank you for that. And families, again, we have the links to resources where you can, go in, click, and reinforce these skills at home. So we have a few items here. And Clever has a lot of things and every student has access to it. Right, moving on to the next part.
All right. I think this is the last one, right? So these are kind of the last few things I would mention. First, your students' commute. So one thing that often changes when a student goes to elementary and middle school is how they get to school every day. Some students live close enough that they can just walk. There are still plenty of middle schoolers who are being driven by families or carpooling with other families. That's still very typical. But more often, we start to see students traveling by themselves or with other students to and from school when maybe they didn't do that in elementary school. And in some cases, your student may be traveling across the city on the train, on the bus, maybe on multiple trains and multiple buses. And that can be really scary for a student, but also a parent when your 11-year-old is going out there in the world and trying to navigate and remain safe and responsible. So what I would do and recommend is that you and your student actually practice that commute multiple times in advance of the first day of school. Really have them get the hang of it, make sure they know exactly where they're going, entrances to use for the metro, what times the buses are, all of those important things. Have them practice it beforehand. It's going to make them less anxious. It's going to make you less anxious. Along with that, one of the other benefits of Summer Bridge, going to any summer events your school is having, starting to communicate with the school, is that you may find other students who live near you that you weren't aware of, and your student could travel to school with some classmates, right? It's probably going to make you less anxious to know that your student is traveling with 4 or 5 peers rather than traveling by themselves every day. So practice the commute, but also use this summer as an opportunity to find maybe some students who could be buddies with yours as they travel to and from school. Organization is huge in middle school. As I said, your student is going to have several classes, several teachers, homework in different classes. In some classes, they may have homework every night. In other classes, they may have homework once a week, or even more irregularly than that, or not at all. So they do have to really remain organized to stay on top of those things. So you can support them with helping them establish their daily routine, starting with when they wake up in the morning, what their morning routine is getting ready, when they leave the house. Part of practicing that commute is knowing what time you're going to need to leave the house each day in order to get to your school on time. So practicing that, making sure that you're getting it down to the minute. And then after school, when your student gets home, where are they sitting to do their homework? What is that location? Making sure that's the same location every day, that students work on homework at the same time every day, that you or another family member checks it at the same time every day, right? Like building in that routine and habit, because consistency is everything. And that's what's going to set your student up for success. So set that up over the summer. And make sure those are established and that you're holding your student to those organizational systems. As it relates to what they should actually have in terms of materials, I would recommend just starting your student with a very simple homework folder. Basic folder, I would get a durable one so that it could last all year. But in the folder on one side is any homework or papers that need to get home. On the other side is completed homework or things that you've signed that need to go back to the school, right? Have it be an all-in-one, everything is in that folder. Some schools have agenda books where students write down their homework. Other schools give them an agenda paper for the week. So you can find out exactly what that is. But I think a very basic homework folder that you're requiring your student to use and holding them accountable for is one of the easiest ways to help them stay organized. And then here is my favorite tip, but perhaps the most important. Delete your student's social media. If your student has Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, any of those, if they don't need to have it, I would recommend deleting it. If you're not going to delete it, then you should closely monitor their online activity and be aware that young people are also very adept at hiding the things that they're doing online. So even if you're closely monitoring them, you could be missing something. Why do I say this? Middle school, you know, we care about our peers' opinions a lot. Students are starting to go through changes. You know, middle schoolers are not always the nicest people, is what I'll say, right? They're dealing with their own stuff going on, and oftentimes they take it out on each other. There's a lot of nonsense that starts on social media. There's a lot of nonsense that starts in group text chats that no adult has their eyes on. There's a lot of negativity that happens on social media and happens through messaging on phones that then carries over into the school building and can create drama and conflict, or it could just really impact your students' mental health in a negative way. So if your student doesn't need social media, I think a lot of those sites you're supposed to be 13 anyway, so they probably shouldn't have it. If they don't need it, delete it. And if they're going to have it, monitor it very closely, because a lot of negativity starts there and it's so avoidable. And it also really makes the job of your student school administrators, teachers a lot more difficult when they're dealing with that instead of what's happening in the school building. This is just a recap of some of the resources we have available. So the registration links for enrollment for next school year, enroll right now if you haven't already, as well as the Algebra Accelerator. Registration for Summer Bridge is different school to school. So your school will be able to send you a link to sign up for Summer Bridge. But again, that's another reason to open up those lines of communication now. There's a great resource here. After your student reads each day, there's a list of really excellent questions that you can ask them that helps to build and assess their comprehension. There are a number of sites that have free math basic skill worksheets and answer keys. So if you wanted to have them practice their times tables, in addition to other addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, you can print things off from this site as well as a number of others. There's no reason you need to be making your own math problems for your student. And then there are the last couple of resources are around the importance of creating routines in middle school and how social media and smartphones in general can impact your teens' mental health. So check those resources out. Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right, so let's jump into some questions. We'll go ahead and start with a question that came in through the Q&A. The question says, what is the best way to double check that enrollment went through? Should we call the school? Yes, I was just in a meeting with the enrollment team, and the best way to check is by calling the school and making sure that everything that you needed to submit is in. And they'll just look it up in the system and find your student and confirm with you, or they will let you know that if anything's missing. All right, so now let's go into the questions that came in through the registration. All right, so the first question that we had come in, Greg, said, I heard that in middle school, students need to remember to write down their homework and tests. That the teacher might say like, oh, it's on the board, but might not remind them. How can parents help their child keep track of their work? You mentioned this a little bit. I don't know if you could expand on that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. So first, just to reinforce what I said a little earlier, every middle school is different. There is not a norm in terms of like how often homework comes home, what classes, how much time it's going to take. It's fairly different school to school. And I would say post-pandemic, it's even more different school to school. There are some schools that they virtually have no homework at this point. There are other schools that have it in every class. It runs the gamut. So first and foremost, open up the lines of communication with your school. Ask the question, right? Like ask what the norm is at that school. They may be able to share something immediately, or they can follow up a little closer to the school year, but find out what the norm is at the school and how students are expected to stay organized. Like I said, some schools have agenda books they give out to students. Some schools have homework folders that they either give to students or require students to purchase. But find out what that school uses in terms of organizational systems. And then once you know that, then you can actually support your student and hold them accountable for keeping track of their work. So like I said a little bit earlier, a simple homework folder, maybe with like an agenda paper or an agenda book, is like the easiest system to have to start. Basic homework folder, work that's coming home, homework or things that parents have to sign, for example. The other side is things that are going back. Requiring your student to bring that home every day, setting a time that you're going to review it, go through it with them. But that's only going to work if you are extremely consistent about it. So just as we want our student to be consistent about writing things down and bringing it home, on the other end, we as adults have to be just as consistent about checking it and holding them accountable. So make sure that you're doing that. But again, find out what the school specifically does. In addition to all of that, most of our middle schools utilize Remind in addition to weekly newsletters and other forms of communication. In a lot of cases, teachers or grade level administrators will send out information about upcoming tests, assignments, et cetera. So that might also be a way that you are informed beyond just your student remembering to write it down. So again, it's all about opening the lines of communication. Over the first few weeks of school, your students' teachers will likely send home a syllabus or other information about the course. Make sure you're reviewing that and reaching out with questions. But at the end of the day, I would try to start simple, but be extremely consistent about it. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, so next question that we had is, do students with IEP, so individualized education programs or plans, have special accommodations when it comes to middle school placement?
They have the same accommodations and supports that they would have at their previous school that is required in their IEP, right? An IEP is a legal document. Your student's school is required to provide the services that are documented in the IEP. So if your student has an IEP and they're supposed to be in a self-contained program, so in a separate, smaller classroom, we have programs called BES, SLS, CES, ILS. If you are familiar with those acronyms, those types of programs are offered at our middle schools. Not every middle school offers all of those, but like one middle school may offer BES and SLS, so students are placed in that school. It's all based on what programs each school offers and what feeder pattern your student is. So if you have questions about it, reach out to your middle school, make sure that, my student is coming from this school and they're in a self-contained program. I just want to make sure that you are the right middle school for me to be enrolling in. It likely is, but it can't hurt to reach out and ask. But if it's documented in your student's IEP, you should assume that that is being honored in middle school. If your student is not in a self-contained program, so they're in a larger class with students who have IEPs and students who don't have IEPs, we call that an inclusion model. All of our middle schools offer inclusion classes. So if your student is in that scenario, then regardless of the middle school that they're going to, they will offer inclusion supports. And you will likely find out either over the summer or early in the school year who your student's special education case manager is. So again, opening the lines of communication with that person so they can field any questions, they can advocate for your student. But yes, any student who has an IEP, you should expect that those accommodations are going to be met in middle school as they were in elementary.
Excellent. Thank you, Greg. And we also dropped in the chat, Jerry dropped the link to the specialized instruction team. And you can find more information and emails for folks who need specific types of services in there too. All right, let's go to our next question. This one says, now that my child will be in middle school, she will be taking a public bus ride across town, and I don't want her to lose her backpack or music instrument. This parent mentioned that their child is getting more distracted as they're becoming older. What can they do to make sure that she is responsible and comes home with everything that she left home with, that she can come back with it? Lunch bag, instrument, backpack, jacket.
Yes, great question. So I talked earlier about practicing the commute, rehearsing the commute. I mean, that helps. The more your student is comfortable with it, the less likely they are to be thoughtless as they're traveling. I don't know, like it's, I would say if you are really worried about your student leaving things on the bus, like I would make sure that they're only bringing home the essential things that they need to bring home, right? Like musical instrument, if they're in a band class, maybe it's required that they bring it home and practice, but perhaps it's not. And if it's not, and you're really worried about them losing it, then perhaps let's eliminate the possibility of that and have them just keep it at school, right? Their book bag, right? Maybe you want their book bag, you only bring home your agenda book and your homework folder, for example, right? Like keep it really basic, because in the worst case scenario, if they do leave that, if they lose that book bag, they might lose like a day's worth of homework and their agenda book, which are things that are so easy to replace immediately. So I would, if you're really worried about that, I would just try to keep it simple in terms of what they're bringing home from school. But in addition to that, any items that they're bringing on that bus, I would have labeled with maybe just their first name and the school. And you could even put the school's phone number if you want. I wouldn't put like last name, addresses, things that are particularly sensitive. But if your student's book bag has their first name and the school's name, and maybe even the school's phone number, like the Metro driver will likely make an attempt to get it back to that school. So that's another thing that I recommend. But more than anything, if your student has a tendency to be a little thoughtless with this, I would just keep it basic in terms of what they're bringing home.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and that's, I had not thought of that. That's so clever to put the school address and the school phone number, because that is information that can be easily found online anyway, right?
Yeah.
All right, so I am going to open it up to the folks who are on the call. If you were unable to submit your question in the registration or type it out in the chat or Q&A, you can now become unmuted and ask your question. If we have a lot of folks, like I recommend raising the hand so we can go in that order. But we're a fairly small group today. So jump right in. We are a little shy today, it seems. We did have a couple more questions from the registration.
Okay.
Yeah, we did. One question that came in is, how do I get my child to focus on schoolwork? I want to make sure they know that it's important. I want to drive that message home. So what's the best thing? How can I do that?
How can you emphasize the importance of schoolwork? Well, I mean, I think students, like anyone else, they need to understand the why behind what they're doing, right? So as much as you can really make them understand that, like, doing well academically now will lead to this, which will then lead to this, which will then lead to this, right? And trying to tie it to whatever your students' interests and goals are, right? Like regardless of what your student says they want to be when they grow up, doing well academically is likely a prerequisite, particularly at this age, right? If you're not getting to high school and getting through high school, your opportunities are going to be very limited. So I would try to tie it as much as possible to their long-term goals. That being said, middle schoolers are immature, and at that age, they don't always have the foresight to be able to see something that far in the future and have it really influence their behavior on a day-to-day, right? Maybe some can, others not as much. Like what does your student enjoy doing, right? Like if devices, TV time, playing with friends, all of those things, like doing the academic work should be a prerequisite to doing any of the things that they want to do, right? Just like I have to do my job before I get to go home at the end of the day and, watch TV and relax. Like this is their job. So they should be required to do their job before they're doing something that they want to do and enjoy. So whether that's athletics, hanging out with friends, being on their phone, watching TV, the work comes first. So yes, try to tie it to their goals long-term. You want your students to value education, but also know that as an 11-year-old, it can be pretty difficult to do that. So you should also make it clear that your schoolwork comes first, and there will be none of that other stuff until it's done and done at the level that you're capable of.
Thank you. We have one question talking about work. How are students placed in math when they start 6th grade? Like what
Yep.
information goes into that? And I guess like a follow-up question that I'm curious about too is if they attend the math accelerator, the algebra accelerator enrichment program, and they do really well, is that also taken into consideration when they're placed in math in 6th grade?
So when your student's middle school is doing scheduling over this summer, they will get your students' iReady math data, so how they did on the iReady assessment throughout the course of the school year. Their grade, like how they did in their math classes, obviously. We don't get CAPE results till usually like late August, so that's right around when the school year starts, but we do use CAPE results as well. And then yes, we also see who successfully completed the algebra accelerator, and that informs who is placed into an advanced math class. Some students might be placed directly into 7th grade math, for example, if they're well above grade level. But it is generally their test scores, iReady, CAPE, how they did in their math class in terms of grades, algebra accelerator, but also families advocating does also help. So if you really want your student to be on an advanced math track, and whether you know their level or not, like you can always reach out to the 6th grade assistant principal and ask and advocate, right? Like at this age, even if a student is a bit below grade level, if we get them additional supports, if you're doing things at home that supplement what's happening at school, like we can get them to and above grade level relatively quickly in some cases. So I would say advocate, like reach out and advocate and say, hey, I'd really love my student to be in advanced math class next year. Like, what can we be doing this summer? Ask your school administrator that. But it's based on test scores, grades, and then more qualitative measures like parent advocacy, et cetera.
Thank you. And then just to clarify, Greg, when you said DC CAPE, that is like a new term that we use for what we used to call PARCC, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to drop a link in the chat so families can who might be hearing the term for the first time, like can see that it's the what like this the tests that our students will take. So that's more information there. So okay, so I think if I were a parent, just making sure that like I am advocating for my child, especially if they're doing the summer acceleration, algebra accelerator, right? Because that is such a great opportunity for them. Additionally, families, for Parent University, we have a few sessions related on math specifically. So I'm popping it here. So we have we have a lot of videos on our YouTube DCPS playlist, but we have a few specifically on math. We have 4. I highly recommend looking at the Coaching Your Child How to Be a Math Person, because a lot of that are things that we can do at home right now, right? Just like having that positive attitude about math and really believing that every person is a math person. Then the everyday math conversations, that's another really good one to try out. And then we have one specifically on secondary math. And this one talks about the math curriculum that is used in middle school. So if you're thinking about, gosh, like I want more math information that is specific to DC Public Schools, you can go into our Parent U on Demand, and we have those short videos there. All right. Let me close this out there. There we go. All right. Let me make sure to see if there are any other questions that have come in. Nope. I think that is it. You're very comprehensive, Greg. Thank you so much. To close us out, Jerry is putting a link in our he's putting some links in the chat. The one that he just put in is again featuring Greg. And this is, this session was specifically 6th grade. The link, the YouTube video that we have with Greg is the gamut of middle school and supporting your child throughout middle school. Please check that out. And then Jerry will be will be doing both, dropping a link to a survey and also popping it up on your screen. We want to know how this session felt like to you. This helps us continue planning and improving. So please complete that. Well, families, you're doing that. Greg, one last question.
Sure.
We covered a lot of information today. And if families were to do one thing, at the end of this call or tomorrow, to support their child this summer to get them ready for 6th grade, what would be that one action that would be like the most impactful action?
So enroll your student. That's going to be a precursor. Enroll your student for next year. And then the one action is find out who the 6th grade administrator is and send them an email introducing yourself and your student. If that's all you do and it just said, here we are, great to meet you, we're excited for next year, that's fine if it's just that. But you could also set up a meeting, you could share some information about your student that might be helpful, you can ask questions. But yeah, it'll take 10, 15 minutes and it will start a line of communication that will greatly benefit you and your student for the year to come.
We hope this Parent University session helped answer your questions. All resources and links that were mentioned throughout this video are linked in the description box, including the survey where you can submit your questions or suggestions for additional Parent University videos and other resources.